Hello, everyone's Forest Focus. As Nottingham Forest wait for confirmation, they will be in the Europa League, wait to sign a winger or two. And I'll change my intro. We're going to talk about something else, but I'll throw in that Spurs are reportedly very keen on Morgan Gibbs-White, as reported by David Ornstein of The Athletic. So who better to have on the podcast today than Forest the Athletic's Forest reporter even. If this wasn't live, I'd probably just re-edit that. But it's live. Paul Taylor, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you guys?
Yeah, I'm well. I'm not too bad. A bit harassed and a bit rushed, but these chaps have been very patient with me, so I appreciate that. Pete Blackburn, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Slightly rocked by the news coming out a minute before we were setting up on the podcast, but otherwise fine.
Yes, let's get into that then. Tells his colleague David Ornstein of The Athletic, a piece was put out saying Tottenham Hotspur are set to turn their focus to Nottingham Forest midfielder Morgan Gibbs-White as work continues to bolster Thomas Frank's squad for next season. Gibbs-White is high on the recruitment lists of several leading clubs, and Spurs hope to convince him to join them if a deal can be agreed with Forest. I'll kick it off with you, Pete. On one hand, that says the deal's nowhere near close. On the other hand, this is how it all started with Elanga, and the ball rolls over the subsequent 2 weeks. So, like you say, 2 minutes after the news broke, how are you processing that?
I think my instinct is to try not to worry about it until things are more concrete than they are at this point. I'm not sure anything's drastically changed. I think it's been pretty clear for some time now that Morgan is a player that lots of clubs in this division, and particularly the ones at the top of the division, both in terms of league placing and reputation, I guess, because we can't call Spurs a top of the league side based on recent performance. It's no surprise that those guys are interested in him. I mean, he fits the profile perfectly, and we've spoken before so many times about what he brings to Forest, and really it's quite a remarkable combination of the sort of technical brilliance that he has and that driving impact combined with that incredible work rate and desire, the ability to get around the pitch. He's someone who will get stuck in. He's got a real drive about him. So it's not a surprise, is it? Let's face it. I think he improves every squad in England, and he improves most starting 11s as well. So it's no surprise whatsoever that there's interest in him. At this point, it's nothing more than that as far as we know. I think Forest are probably in a position to drive a pretty hard bargain, albeit they have to be fair to the player as well. And if a big number comes along, then I imagine Morgan's likely to want to go. And at that point, I'm not sure there's a great deal we can do about it. But given that the Elanga deal is going through, there's not going to be presumably any desperation to sell. And in which case, we couldn't be in a much better position, really. This is what happens when your model is successful and when you've got a good culture and a good environment, and players get better and become more valuable and they perform well. Other teams want to buy them. But fingers crossed, the financial situation now will allow us to be picky about offers, and that we can drive the hardest bargain if indeed he's going to go. And if not, fingers crossed, he can stick around, sign a new contract and have another great season with us. But, I think we were all thinking that this could be the summer that Gibbs-White goes. I just don't think we were thinking it might be the summer where both him and Elanga go.
What do you think about it, Tails?
I agree with a lot of what Pete's just said, to be honest. He's summed up fairly neatly. I think the important thing is that while there is clearly a lot of interest in Morgan, and that's no surprise, that there's a big difference between there being interest in Morgan Gibbs-White and there being a bid that is acceptable to Nottingham Forest. Now they've done, or very, very, very close to doing the deal for Anthony Elanga. There's no pressure on them at all to sell anybody for, PSR reasons or to give them more financial leeway to bring in new players. They don't need to do it. So they're in a strong bargaining position, and anybody who wants to sign Morgan Gibbs-White is going to have to come up with a very big number indeed. They've signed him effectively. They signed him for 25 million, going up to potentially 42 or so million pounds, depending on various different add-ons, a lot of which will have been activated by now. So they need to be making a profit if they're selling a player like Morgan, and a substantial profit at that. So if anybody comes in, I mean, I'm pulling figures out of the air here, but I suspect, you've got to be talking 60, 70, 80 million pounds before there's even a conversation to be had. And is anybody going to come up with that kind of number? I'm not sure. I think it's a situation that Forest fans will monitor with a degree of worry and concern, but I think if the deal does happen, if he is sold to anybody, then it will be for the kind of number that will make Forest happy rather than anybody who buys him, if that makes any sense. They have a price on the head of every player, like every club, but in his case, it will be a very big one, and it's still got to be a point where somebody reaches that very big number.
Put a number on it, Pete. What would you say for you to be convinced?
Oh,
I know it's an arbitrary number, but it's got to be huge.
I hate doing the numbers. I'd need to. I'm not sure what the PSR calculation is, so that would inform things for me. But look, I'd be pretty disappointed if you're not getting in and around 70. I'd have thought. Whether that's possible or not, I don't know. Like, I think they said the same thing about Alanga. It's hard to really get a sense of what proper value is for so many different reasons, but also it's hard to extricate yourself as a fan from those sorts of valuations, knowing the players so intimately and having a relationship with them and all that sort of stuff. So maybe it's less than that, but I think it would have to be more than Alanga from my point of view, because I think in Gibbs-White, what you're getting, aside from arguably a bit more goal contribution to come, I think you're getting a ready-made player who is at the absolute, top of his game right now.
I suppose, thinking about it, what people want to say, there's two things. On one hand, he's got 2 years left on his contract, and if he's not going to sign a contract, nothing's changed. You might have to cash in on him. On the other hand, it's, can you afford, in a football sense, to sell two of your best players and rebuild half your attack, or if you sell two of them? It puts Forest in a very difficult position if Spurs stump up, let's say 70, 80 million quid. Forest are in a tough spot, aren't they?
Yeah, I think, like I said, there'll be a number that Forest have in mind that they would do business for. I think, to refer back to the Alanga situation, I mean, Newcastle came up with a very good offer for a player that Forest bought for £15 million, and they're going to sell him for, even taking into account the sell-on fee that they'll have to pay Manchester United, they're selling for 3 times the amount they paid for him, effectively, which is basically what the Forest model was always going to be in the Premier League. Sign good young players that perhaps cost a little bit of money, invest in good young players that are only going to get better and improve, and sell them on at a profit, and then trust your recruitment team to go out and do what they did when they sold Brennan Johnson. They sold Brennan Johnson for £47 million to Tottenham a few years ago, and immediately went out and signed Callum Hudson-Odoi and Alanga for around 20 in total. If they can go out and do something similar again this summer, if they can find good young players and spend the money that they're getting and still keep a bit aside for, the running of the club, etc., then that's a pretty healthy business model. It's one that Brighton have followed for many years and have become very good at. And I don't think it's anything to be ashamed of to sort of admit that you're following that model or that business plan, that is the way you survive, because the kind of other income streams that Forest have will be vastly less than but vastly less than the big six, for example, who will be earning hundreds of millions of pounds in corporate income, sponsorship, and all the rest of it. And Forest are probably, through no fault of their own, by the way, lagging a little way behind on that front. Until they build the new stand, that'll change things. But this is the reality. If they've got talented young players that other clubs want to sign and they're offering good money for them, then the reality is that Forest are going to have to think long and hard about these situations and act in the best interest of the long-term future of the club. They've done that with Alanga. Will they ultimately do that with Morgan Gibbs-White as well? We will see. But I, just to echo the original point, I think it will take a lot of money for Forest to be persuaded to do that.
FPL Forest in the chat, and a few other people saying, why would he go to Spurs? I mean, I think this is really where the Champions League thing kicks in. We don't have Champions League football, and they do. And they've got the big stadium, they've got London, they've got that pull. I know they finish a lot of places below us, but they could offer them a big salary. They've got so much money to burn. Daniel Levy doesn't spend it, but they've got an absolute ton of money. They had more PSR money to spend than anyone if they ever choose to invest it. So I think there is the argument that he would go there, sadly. So there's that sense. The other sense from our point of view, Pete, I guess, in the fan sense, is the emotion of it. Like you sort of do grow attached to him in a sense, because we didn't, like you say, it wasn't until 20 minutes ago, there was no vision in my mind of him going, and he's such an important part of our team, and it felt like we could build around him for another year or 2 years, and it would be kind of such a blow in that sense for the fans and the football sense of how important he is to us, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think my general views on this have to remain the same as they always have, and that's that the Forest have to stick to the model. I don't think there's an awful lot you can do about it. If you get an offer from a club that's desirable for a player that meets your valuation, I've said so many times, that's what the Forest model has to be built on. It has to be that we go out there, we find talent, we provide the best environment and culture we can to develop that talent, and then if that means that they feel they've outgrown us and other clubs do, then at that point you're paid for all that work and in the profit you can make, and that means that we can reinvest, whether that's in infrastructure or if it's in players or whatever. And that's the only model there is for Forest. There has to be a sort of social contract between player and club in that sense, because otherwise no one's coming to us to take on that period of time. These players come here now, and we're establishing a reputation for them becoming better while they're with us, and then us saying, look, we'll do the right thing by you. The money's got to be right, and I think that's only fair, and you'd hope that we have the right sort of characters in the football club that mean they understand that too. But if the money is right, I don't think you can stand in their way. So coming on to your other points, I mean, look, if this happens, it's an awful lot of change for the football club, and it's not ideal. But what I think I'd see it as a high risk and high reward situation potentially. In this moment, with this news being sort of pretty fresh, it feels quite jarring. But actually, I think the Elanga deal meant that Forest were in a situation where they could do a bit of tinkering around the edges, but really, does it give you enough leeway to enact dramatic change? No. And do Forest need quite a lot of change? Potentially, if you're talking about competing on two fronts, I think we're all talking about them signing 6 or 7 quality Premier League players. It's a lot of money. So the high reward is potentially that if you do two, then you've suddenly got a genuine headroom to play with. Not only that, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here because ultimately I'll feel gutted if Morgan goes. But I do think the devil's advocate argument is we play a very specific way because of the role Morgan has in the team, and it's arguable that if you make those 2 deals, there's potential for you to change things significantly. We get so many fans in the comments talking about 4-3-3 and stuff like that. It does open new opportunities. I'm trying to see it both ways. And look, it'll be a real shame if he goes because I think we're all pretty attached to him. But look, this is just football, and these are the sort of difficult and quite sad rewards of doing things pretty well. This is how football is structured now. We're hamstrung by the regulations, and that's the environment we live in. I don't think there's anything that Forest can do if the offer is right, and you just have to wish them the best and try and move on in the best way possible. But look, let's see what plays out.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, Derek here says about Brentford. Sol Watkins got Tony. Sold Tony. Well, eventually they'd already got Vista and Mbeumo by then. I suppose my thing is I said I'd be fine with selling Elanga if we didn't sell any more big players, so I can't change my stance. I would worry then, not that we'd be catastrophically tumbling down the league, but it's hard to rebuild an attack. I mean, have we got a replacement already, Tails, in Elliot Anderson, or does that solve one problem by creating another, because then you need 2 midfielders?
I think he's definitely a player that could play in that role and probably excel there. He's been outstanding in a lot of different positions, hasn't he? I mean, he's looked very good in that deeper line midfield role, and he did it again with England this summer. He looks very... If Forest persevere with that 4-2-3-1, then he's almost the first name on the team sheet at one of those 2 positions. So he's one option, but you would expect if Forest sell Morgan Gibbs-White, then they would go out and sign a replacement. They wouldn't just leave that vast void that he would leave empty in terms of new additions. I'm sure they'd look to sign somebody that could play there. But just to expand on what Pete said a little bit, you look at players like Anderson and Hudson-Odoi and Elanga and Gibbs-White, Murillo. I'm Nico Williams. I'm probably missing a few, but there are so many players who have come to Forest and benefited career-wise by being at Nottingham Forest, getting time in the first team, playing at Premier League level, establishing themselves at this level and getting regular game time. And what you want is for Forest to get that reputation for being, I don't want to say stepping stone, because that paints a picture that they're always going to be sold as part of the journey. But they know that if they come to Forest, they're going to improve their careers. They're going to get better. They're going to learn, get an education, find out about Premier League football within a good, successful, hopefully, Premier League side. And then maybe have the opportunity to move on to a club that's just at another level. That's where Forest want to be. They want to be at that level. They want to gradually improve, as they have done over the last 2 years, at an extraordinary rate, going from being a team that's battled relegation to being one that's now, people will expect them to challenge for Europe again next season. Perhaps not Champions League, but the reality is that people will think they're going to be pushing for another top 7, top 8 finish. So they are moving upwards. Their standing in the game is gradually improving. But for now, they have to have an acceptance, maybe, of their position in the order of things, and hopefully they continue to climb. But this is part of the process for getting there. This is part of the process of getting good young players, improving them as players and in value, and then using that money to invest again in other good young players. It's a circle that they need to continue and have confidence and belief in their recruitment team that has been very, very good in recent years, outstanding even, and trust that they can do it all again.
I think, Matt, just as a bit of a summary, look, Tails might know that I'm wrong or otherwise, but it feels to me that this one will come down to whether Morgan wants to go once there's an offer that's there or not. I think Forest will be in a position now where they can say no to offers up to a relatively silly amount. There's probably a number that would ultimately be too silly for them to say no to, but generally I think this is the PSR situation is okay for now with the Elanga deal. I think it's all going to come down to the player. And you asked the question earlier, why would he want to go to Spurs? I mean, I think aside from being a Forest fan, I'd feel like the question is probably why wouldn't he want to, really? If you're really honest with yourself, he's going to get paid a lot more. Forest aren't paying him the sort of money that he's going to get paid at a Champions League club. They've also got arguably the best infrastructure in world football, incredible stadium, unbelievable training ground. I mean, it is worlds apart from what we can offer, and that's just the truth of the matter. You can be as patriotic's not the right word, but as dyed in the wool a Forest fan as you want, but those are just the realities of it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I don't know David Ornstein's sources; they're impeccable, obviously. But if it's come out, there must be some indication there's some interest that it will happen. I don't know. Someone's briefing him, and I wonder if it's Morgan's camp giving an indication. I don't know. I feel like he would want to go there. I suppose we'll put this point up from Pat. Blood in the water for Predators as well. You have to draw a line somewhere, I guess. But lots of money. I
don't think that's true. I understand why you'd say that, and I'm having an emotional reaction to this news while also trying to have a not emotional reaction to it and talk about it in a reasonable way. But I don't think that's true. I think Forest selling these players for good money is the opposite of blood in the water for Predators. This is us selling players at the peak moment, which is always what the plan is. It was always going to hurt when it happened, and it will hurt more if there's two rather than if there's one. Losing Elanga is painful enough as a Forest fan who's been on the edge of the seat because he's the way he plays for us and the importance he has. But actually, these are signs that what Forest are doing is working, not signs that there's a problem or a sense of weakness around the football club. And the more times you do these deals, the less you have to do them, and the more that you can demand the right terms, and the more that we can continue doing what we are doing. So I don't see it as weakness at all. It will ultimately be sad if it happens, but it is also the right way of operating.
Yeah, and there's people in the chat asking why we're talking about this, and there's nothing in it. I mean, there was stuff about Morgan that was in Football Insider saying he'd agreed terms that wasn't on our agenda and wasn't going to get mentioned. But I think once David Ornstein starts talking about it, I'm not going to ignore it. It's going to get a very hefty discussion, and also the prospect of selling your England international and best player. I'd be an absolute mug if we weren't leading off on it. So that's why we're talking about it, certainly. Any final words on this, Tales, before we move on?
I think there's sometimes a notion that if you give these things air in the media world, then it becomes reality, and it's not really true, is it?
No,
it's not like
definitely not.
it's not like we're generating this happening by talking about it. It's there. It's you know, if David Ornstein is reporting it, then it's going to be right. He's impeccable normally in his sourcing. So yeah,
true. Pete, any final words, and then we'll move on to Europa League after a break.
No, just only if only we had that sort of power, we could move the markets. That'd be phenomenal.
Yeah.
We could use our powers for good.
Yeah. Look, I'm going to say Forest have agreed a deal for Bakayoko, and it'll happen. There you go. Right. Let's take a quick word for the Trent navigation. A reminder that you can watch the British Lions tour is coming up soon. First test Saturday the 19th of July, so next Saturday. You can watch them all at 10 a.m. At the Nav. Get your breakfast there, get your Guinness there if you so desire. And a reminder, our live show is coming up as well. That's much closer on the agenda. That is on the 25th of July. Kelv and Lewis are on the panel, and Lewis will be on the podcast tomorrow as well. So we'll discuss this, obviously, I'm sure, and a few more bits. But you get your tickets for a £5 if you want to ask yourself, if you want to ask questions of Kelv and Lou. And Pete will be on the panel as well in the second half with Mikey and Greg. Right, let's talk about this whole Europa League thing. That was going to be our main topic, waiting for confirmation of that around whether Forest will get promoted and Crystal Palace will be demoted into the Conference League. What's your general thoughts on that one, Pete?
I don't know how to focus on anything else now. I think they're really complicated and sort of nuanced thoughts on it, to be honest. I don't have like a prevailing argument that makes a great deal of sense. I just feel lots of things about it. One, I sort of feel very sorry for Crystal Palace if that happens, particularly in terms of the fans and whatever. And I feel that it's a shame that so often the fans are the ones who suffer from the decision making of, the rich and powerful people in charge of football clubs that, are bang on about being community institutions rather than being some sort of faceless businesses or whatever. So I'd feel really sorry for them if that happened, because it's a good story and I think they deserve it for the way the football club has generally been run and the way they've sort of progressed over the years. But, lots of things are also true. The rules, such as they are, I mean, they are a massive ass, let's face it. But the rules are the rules, and Forest have been on the wrong end of similar rules recently. I said at the time when that happened, we have to take it on the chin. We've broken the rules and we deserve some form of punishment. And in which case, I can't really change my view on that now. And if that's how it all shakes out, I'm not going to feel dirty for Forest having taken a Europa League position. And I think it wouldn't take long for me to be pretty excited about it, because I think it's definitely a more prestigious competition. It feels much more like the sort of European tour that you dream of as a football fan, I guess. And so there's that. And then just all the multi-club stuff on its own, I think, is just an absolute mess, an absolute farce. In my sort of ideal world, none of it would be possible. I don't think you can possibly believe, although some people do, that the people who own football clubs in this world can be trusted to act with total integrity all the time, and that it's fine for them to own different football clubs in the same competition. Personally, I think that's mad pie in the sky stuff. And I feel for the fans of football clubs and the communities around football clubs, where they essentially become a vassal for a richer club elsewhere. Imagine if that was us. I'd feel horrendous about that. That's not what football means to us, I don't think. So certainly I'd be pretty gutted about that. So I think the rules are a joke. I think the obvious way to deal with it is to get rid of multi-club ownership as a prospect. That's not going to happen, because the politics of the people who run football are that they're enthralled to the rich and powerful. In which case, I think the alternative probably should be that you let it thrive with very, very obvious rules. It's absolutely absurd that you're at a point where teams are genuinely getting prepared for a new season, not knowing where they're going to be playing, and that's because the people who regulate and run the competition haven't yet decided whether this is a problem or not. How can the rules be that that arbitrary and that loose. I can't believe that it's got to a point where in 2025 that they've not nailed this down, and I presume that they will try to do so as a result of this. But look, I've got no time for any of the regulators, any of the people involved in these things. I think most of the rules governing football right now are an absolute disgrace, and they're all there for the wrong reasons. But yeah, so lots of different views. I won't feel sad about it from a Forest point of view, and I won't feel guilty about it. But I will feel sorry for Crystal Palace fans who don't deserve this. And I think it's important that fans try and bring a sort of sense of solidarity between football clubs back to football, because we saw it once, didn't we, with the European Super League. We saw people come together to say, no, this is not happening in our sport. I think I'd like to see that a lot more. Whether it's on ticket prices, whether it's on VAR, whether it's on some of this really big stuff, and we don't get there by sort of sniping between clubs. So I sort of feel a bit of solidarity with the Palace fans in that sense.
Let's look at the teams that are in it then. This is the projected pots. You've got Roma, as people who are listening, not watching. Roma are the kind of the headline team in pot 1. Porto, Betis, Villa. Pot 2's got Fenerbahce, got Lyon, obviously, and then pot 3 would have us as it stands. Freiburg, Anderlecht. Shame we're in pot 3. Probably we didn't want to play them. Nice are in there. Stuttgart are in pot 4. So there's good teams in there. Tails, more prestigious teams, more exciting games for the fans. And then obviously it still looks to me like, I know this sounds mad as a sign of how far we've come. I wouldn't bet against us beating Roma over 2 legs. So it's a very exciting prospect.
Yeah, the whole thing about just being back in Europe was incredibly exciting to begin with, wasn't it? I know it was a bit of a strange situation at the end of last season, because having spent so long challenging for that Champions League place, it even seemed strange to say out loud that they were pushing for a Champions League place at all. But having spent so long hoping and dreaming that would be the outcome, getting into the Conference League felt like a bit of an anticlimax when it should in fact have felt like a major achievement for a team that had struggled against relegation in both previous seasons. So getting up into the Europa League would sort of not quite flip that on its head completely, but it would feel like a major boost and a big step up. It is a much bigger competition. There are much bigger teams in it. The prize money is greater. The kudos involved in being in it is greater. And as they look to find a replacement potentially for Elanga and maybe for Morgan Gibbs-White, having that prospect of playing in this competition might be more of a lure to potential signings. It might be, a better bit of bait on the end of the fishing rod to try and get replacements in for them. Being able to say that you're a Europa League club rather than a Conference League club might make a decisive difference. But as Pete very eloquently said a moment ago, it's ridiculous that teams don't know now. They shouldn't be in this situation where, in July neither Forest nor Palace know which competition they're going to be in. It's ridiculous how you expected to plan anything or prepare for a new campaign, not knowing which of the European competitions you're going to be in because of that vagueness in the rules. UEFA have basically got to decide whether John Textor had a decisive influence at Palace or not. How's it come to that? It's madness that both clubs are waiting for a meeting of UEFA officials somewhere to decide whether that's the case or not. It's silly and it shouldn't be allowed to happen.
Yeah, Textor seems like, all this stuff I've read about him, he seems like an absolute useful idiot, and I think we've exploited him quite a lot. I don't know if we will do furthermore. Just on Danilo and Turner before we get into other stuff around recruitment, which will be Gibbs-White linked, I'm sure now. There is a press conference afterwards. Michael Gerlinger, who I think is now running Lyon because the French Football Federation want Texas to have nothing to do with them. He was asked about Danilo and Matt Turner, and he said a few transfers are being considered. We need to check the contractual situation. He briefly said. So I don't know if that means there's a contract agreed in place where those deals will go through, but it'd be useful if they did. The other thing I was going to say, Pete, was if we are in the Europa League, it heightens the need for recruitment, and if we sell Morgan Gibbs-White, it really heightens the need for recruitment. So I guess I don't know. We're going back to Gibbs-White again. The clock's ticking, I guess, isn't it?
Well, I think I was probably planning to say that I don't think it really changes anything, the Europa League situation. But obviously, now we're all getting our heads around potentially another star man going. I think it'd be hard to argue that the situation hasn't changed. There's obviously a lot of work to do. There's a fair bit of work to do, regardless of Elanga and Gibbs-White's departures, because we talked about it endlessly. But we saw what happened towards the end of last season, and that's a squad that just couldn't quite get over the line because of all the perfectly reasonable reasons of the perfectly understandable context of a very long, hard season with a very small squad, and then suddenly the injury luck sort of run out, all that sort of stuff. If you're going to try and do what we did again, or do something similar and fight on two fronts, you're going to have to look to progress in terms of what you've got available in the squad. And the obvious way seems to be having 3 or 4 options on the bench who can genuinely change a game for you one way or another, which I just don't think Nuno could look around and say that he had that previously. So there's obviously work to do. I presume that this stuff has all been planned for because, the recruitment team and the various people involved are pretty serious at Forest. And they'll have known that, there was always the likelihood that 1 or even 2 of these players could go. I think if Gibbs-White goes, it could potentially mark a relatively significant change in the way things happen in terms of on pitch stuff at Forest, because there's not that many teams that are really building a side around an out and out number 10 like Morgan, and whether you would look to do that again, I'm not sure. Nuno hasn't had a long history of doing that. Generally in the past he's played a totally different system. So whether it prompts a rethink, or they're already working on different plans, I just don't know. Look, I would always counsel that panic is not an option, and that applies for whoever is involved in the recruitment at the football club, as well as us as fans. And it's all about following your plans and getting things done right, rather than trying to get things done quickly, because you pay for mistakes really, really badly. Forest can't afford to do that. There's going to be significant work needed if both leave, and they're going to have to get things right if we're able to replace such good players with people who can, keep the train moving on. So that they need to take their time. I don't think plans need to change drastically. I hope they don't, because you would expect that they've been planning for all this sort of stuff, all eventualities. And I'd like them to stick to their guns, because the recruitment has been, exceptional for some time now. I would hate to see us return to that sort of sense of panic and desperation that we felt around the football club in previous years, particularly around recruitment. So I'm not going to get worried about it. I'm going to wait and see where we are when the season kicks off, and fingers crossed we'll have some new talented young players to look forward to watching and getting to know.
Can you see why, Pete? Danny Taylor tells his colleague his tweet say he thinks this will happen. So that puts a slant on things as well. There was a comment here, Pete, staying from the fan point of view. My glass, I'm not bothered about you. My glass is very much half empty, something like that. Another comment, my glass is empty right now. I guess you can see why people would feel that way.
Of course I can. Like I said earlier, I'm trying to put a sort of thoughtful spin on things, but when you hear news like that, it's your sort of stomach drops out of it, doesn't it? That's how I feel. I think I said before that it felt odd because we'd been preparing for Gibbs-White's exit early in the summer and close season, and then Elanga, the sort of whole Elanga thing coming around again, felt like a little bit of a surprise, like maybe it had gone away. So that was, that took a few days to sort of really get your head around. And I think maybe I'd sort of settled into the feeling that it would just be Elanga now, because, PSR would look fine. There didn't seem like there had been, much talk around over players. Actually, things had gone quite quiet, even though we knew that, there's obviously interest because they're good footballers and, there's lots of teams out there interested. So that feels like a bit of a shock again now. So I do feel, pretty gutted, I guess. And it's going to take some getting used to, because that's, but with both of them gone, it's a very different football team all of a sudden, isn't it? And, that will take some getting used to. Morgan Gibbs-White has been, I don't think it's overblown to say, he's been the sort of talisman of our hopes and ambitions as football fans for, a good period of time now. He's done some really special things at the football club. It felt like there was a really special bond between player and fans as well. And I don't think this needs to change that. But you saw that tifo that Forza did with Morgan, and seeing Morgan look up to that, and then putting that display that he did. There's something special there, and he is a special footballer. And it feels great that we were the club that really said, come here and thrive, come and do it here. We'll build a team around you. So it'll be really sad to see him go if indeed it all goes through. And to lose two of them is pretty gutting, and it feels like a lot of change. And I don't think people like change very much. So I think a lot of people will be feeling disappointed or a bit anxious about it, like me. But times do move on. We've lost players before. Brennan Johnson moved on for an awful lot of money, and look what happened in the way that we built from there. So I think the football club have earned our optimism in this moment. So I'm not going to have a glass half empty. I'm going to have a glass half full, and hope that these are the sort of moves that can be transformational in spreading a bit of investment slightly wider across the playing stuff.
Tails, I should have said, if you need to dash, do let me know, and we'll let you go. Let's talk a little bit about potential incomings, Tails, to try and cheer people up in the chat. Bakayoko is a very promising player. McAtee's back on the menu. Not that he was ever off it, really. He's linked with Palace and Everton, although people don't see him too enthused with McAtee, but I think he's a good player. Any thoughts on what we can expect from potential incomings in the next week or so?
Or the next week or so. Wow.
2 weeks, whatever, before the window closes. Let's expand the conversation.
Yeah,
it's narrow enough.
One thing I would say is that there's always a sense of panic when signings don't arrive immediately. And I know they've signed Jesus already from Botafogo, and Kuna's probably not far off. So there will be two through the door. But Forest have done a lot of their best business fairly late in the window in the past. I think sort of late July, even right up to the window, they've made really good signings. And Murillo stands out as one. Sangare, who I still think is going to be a decent player. Matt Sells arrived on deadline day in February, I think. So I'm just trying to make the point that I guess the prospect of Elanga and Morgan leaving heightens that sense of panic. That's completely understandable. But I guess you just have to hope that the recruitment team do what they've done in the past and get some good deals over the line again. Bakayoko would be a very good signing, although there's other teams looking at him, so there's going to be some fierce competition there. McAtee has been on the Forest radar for some time, but whilst he's not a like-for-like replacement for Morgan Gibbs-White, he would add something to that creative area of the side if he is a player that Forest do ultimately move for, and they have been interested in him for a long time, so that wouldn't be a surprise, particularly in the light of today's news. So yeah, I mean, the Forest will have a plan. They will have targets in mind. They will have players they want to go for. They do have players they want to go for. There's others as well. They've been linked with Whistler at Brentford since last season as well. So there are players they'll be looking at, and there are deals to be done, and you just have to have faith that they will be as good as the ones they've done in the past. And what feels like a half-empty cup right now will hopefully feel like more of a full one by the time the new season kicks off.
Yeah, you make a good point there, and I'll come back to Pete on that one. Just quickly, Dan asks about other shares in the blind trust still. No, they're not. Everything's reverted to Evangelos Marinakis been in control. Well, I'm sure he was anyway, but officially in control. FPL Forest, Milenkovic and Anderson were straight in. Milenkovic actually didn't sign till the 18th of July last year, so he was still over a week away from signing. So I think perceptions are the business was done straight away. Anderson was obviously the PSR signing. I think Morata was deadline day. Sosa was deadline day, or very near. Jota was quite late in the window. I think I'm right in saying Milenkovic. People correct me if I'm wrong. I think Milenkovic might have been the only early signing that wasn't PSR related, and like I say, that was over a week away. So, yeah, I think the picture is changed by time a little bit. And as Tails says there, Pete, I mean, if, and again, it's a big if, Morgan goes, Elanga goes, there's a lot of money burning in our pockets, which makes buying players difficult. Clubs know you've got a lot of money, but a player like Johan Visser, is someone that becomes more plausible and more needed in a sense. So we would expand our list of targets and our ambitions, I hope, wouldn't we?
I think I'm going to disagree, if that's all right. I don't think I would change anything because certainly, look, I've got reservations about a signing like Wissa because I just don't think it's realistic. No, realistic is not the right word. I'm not sure it's clever to be signing players that are unlikely to have a sell-on value for £20 million plus for a club like Forest. And you say that these sales would give us room to manoeuvre like that. I don't think Forest can afford to throw away any sort of cash. I think the financial rules and regulations are horrendous for a club like Forest. We just do not have the capability to compete with the teams that have massive commercial enterprises, and they have ridiculous things that they can sell to subvert these ludicrous rules, and they have unbelievable 400 million quid a year turnover or whatever. Even if we redevelop the entire City ground, even if we built a new ground somewhere else, we wouldn't be able to compete on those fronts anyway, because that is pie in the sky stuff. Like we're never going to be able to track the same things to Forest as you are going to be to Wembley. Taylor Swift's not coming to do 20 dates at the City ground anytime soon. So we have to accept that we can build on what we've got, and that is exactly what we should be doing. And it's good to see that seems to be the priority right now. But I think the model remains the same, and I think we can be a bit more ambitious in terms of what we might be able to put down for a player, but I don't think it should change the sort of player we want to sign personally. I think the ultimate principle should remain the same, that we're looking for players who we can bring here that will develop, that will become better, that will become much more valuable, and we'll sell them on. And it may be that it means you can spend 30 million quid on a player rather than 20 million quid, and that's your investment, and that's great because it's the same model. But that's how I'd be looking at it. I personally, I think you divert from that too much, and there lies potential future being Leicester.
I agree with you broadly. I genuinely do. I think Forest's business model should be to sign good young players who improve, as we've said already. But is there not a room in the squad for the odd Chris Wood or players like that who, without him, who cost 15 million, I think? That seemed like a ludicrous fee at the time for a player who was in his 30s, but he's proved to be a pretty good investment. I think there's got to be room for one or two players in the squad that are not in the spring of youth and aren't going to increase in value, but it does have to be a minority rather than the majority of the squad. You've got to build a youthful squad with one or two perhaps more experienced figures in it. You accept, well, we've signed it for this amount, but we know he's going to score 10 goals or whatever and contribute this or that and play a valuable part in the team, whilst perhaps even being an influence on the younger players in the squad as well. You need one or two like that in the squad, I think.
I totally agree, and I mean I was bang wrong about Chris Wood, so you can take anything. Yeah, you can take anything I say with a massive pinch of salt. And I think you're absolutely right. What I would say is I think what we're looking for in terms of the experienced players is a Milenkovic, and that's obviously very easily said and a lot less easily done. But someone where the outlay actually is not very significant, and you're getting real value, and it's not a worry that you're not going to get a resale later on. I mean, the fees we're talking about for a Wissa were 30 million quid plus. I'm just not sure Forest can carry that sort of loss. So yeah, I totally agree with the principle, and you can't be obsessed with the sort of young player model. I think that's the sort of majority of your business. But you're right, you're building a team, aren't you? You're building a blend.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are names out there. Bakayoko, obviously. If people watch the video that Pete and Dan did about Evan Gissan is coming up in the chat as well quite a few times. There is talent out there, certainly. What do you think about Bakayoko tales? Fabrizio Romano reporting that Leverkusen are interested, Dortmund are interested, Monaco are interested, Marseille are interested. A big talent, but a tricky one for us to do, you think?
Yeah, probably. When you look at the other teams that are involved and their European pedigree and their teams that are challenging for honours in some cases, I think that whilst he's clearly somebody Forest are interested in, they will do very well if they get that one over the line. I'm not saying they won't, but I just think that they've got to swim the channel a little bit to get him on board.
Yeah, and Leverkusen finished second in the Bundesliga, so they get Champions League football. Well done, Pete. You've done one good turn today. You've talked Banksy 69 down from his depression. He was very glass empty 15 minutes ago. So you've done a good turn.
Well, I'm not sure if I necessarily believe all the things that I'm saying, but as long as it's making me feel better, that's good.
Yeah, there might be some kind of self-counselling in there, certainly. On the screen now, for people who are watching along, and if you're listening, I'll talk you through it. This is the incomes made by English clubs in Europe last season, just in case we do get confirmed in the Europa League. Average income for the English teams was 79 million for the Champions League, 32 million for the Europa League, bearing in mind Spurs won it and United made the final, so that's heightened. The prize money was United got 21 million for making the final, Spurs 27. So 32 million roughly for making Europa League final, and Chelsea got 18 for the Conference League. So there would be a significant increase in for what Forest can make in that sense, certainly. Right, just before we go, Spanish media now reporting Murillo is on a four-man shortlist for their new centre-back. Is that Atletico Madrid, Pete? You've just dropped that in.
Yeah. I'm not sure if we should be saying this. I'm worried about the impact we might be having on viewers and listeners.
I know. Was that Atletico Madrid? Sorry.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Okay. Is that a big source? I mean, we're spitballing live on air here with 600 people watching us.
Well, all I've got is a message saying Spanish media. So no, probably not a good source.
No, let's not. Yeah, it's not the data source. I don't know. I'll have a look in 1 minute about that one. Right, just before we wrap things up, talking of buying things for big fees, for hopefully big rewards, here's an advert for home move estate agents. Right, on screen is the property this week. I don't think Tails has seen one of these, so he can join along. This is in West Bridgeford. It's Fleeman Grove, West Bridgeford. It's in the heart of Lady Bay. 4-bed, 4-bathroom, semi-detached house. Interesting chairs in the dining room, but you can probably buy your own chairs. And it looks a lovely house nestled on a picturesque tree-lined street. It's got, and this is important in Lady Bay, off-street parking for 2 vehicles and no onward chain. So if you are moving, that is one pain certainly solved. So that is guide price 565,000 to 580,000. 4-bed, 3 ensuite bathrooms, and lovely garden as well, if you're on screen watching that now. So yeah, check out the link in the description, although it's not there yet, but it will be after we do this, or just go to Home Move Estate Agents on Google, and they are the people for you. There we go. That's a real shift in tone for Home Move Estate Agents. Right. Oh man, this is really it's just miserable a bit today, isn't it? I'm sorry, but drag Tails in, and he's just having to feel.
But you're blaming me for this now.
No. I mean, it's good timing in that sense to have you on while all this stuff's happening, but it's just a bit miserable that it's happening. I think it is certainly the problem. Right. What are we going to say? What's that?
I've got something cheery to tell you. It's not Forest.
I've got one Forest-related cheery thing. Shall we do my Forest-related cheery thing?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, well, Taiwo is back in pre-season training and looking healthy and looking lean, and that was one boost that he was, I'm sure he's got a long way back, Tails, hasn't he, before we even consider him getting on the pitch. Not that any of us are medical experts, but just to see him smiling is probably the only bit of good news today, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm no medical expert by any means, but I think from the rare occurrences when injuries like this have happened in the past, I think it's taken at least 3 or 4 months for players to get back. So it's probably on schedule for that. Hopefully he can play a part in pre-season, and we'll see him back in a Forest shirt sooner rather than later. But I suspect, again, without any medical knowledge, that something like that is probably something you have to be a little bit careful with while he eases his way back into kind of physical, clashes and challenges where he's suffering impact. So hopefully he'll be ready sooner rather than later, because it was a truly horrific moment witnessing that and seeing a player, as it turns out, so badly injured.
Yeah, true. Weigh in on that if you want, Pete. You're a huge Taiwo fan, so let's talk about something nice just for a couple of minutes.
Well, I think you've got to have a heart of actual coal if it doesn't cheer you up to watch that video and see Taiwo looking happy and looking healthy and embracing his teammates. Look, I'm sure we'll have a discussion many times over the coming season about what role he can play, if any, and how he's looking when he does eventually get back on the pitch and all that sort of stuff. But I think that it's reasonable to sometimes just decide to be an optimistic person, and I'm going to do that right now, and hope that I believe that there is a perfectly reasonable chance that Taiwo can continue to have a contribution at the football club. I think he remains a good player, even if he's not one who always looks aesthetically pleasing, or sometimes it's all a bit of a chaotic mess. He's someone who, even last season, through all of his struggles, he had moments where he comes onto a pitch and he pins a defender. It doesn't matter who that defender is, whether it's Virgil van Dijk or whether it's someone on a newly promoted team or whatever. He gives them problems. So I'm going to believe that there's a chance that he can have a moment or two in a Forest shirt again. And if he doesn't, then I'll remember that first season and everything he gave us as we were massively struggling in really difficult position, and he fired us to Premier League safety. And you can't overrate how important that was. All of the things that we've had to enjoy and we've been able to experience in the months and years since have been as a result of people like him, stepping up and giving us the chance. So for me, I love the guy. And I'm really happy to see him looking in good spirits and looking well. And I hope that we can see the player back as well. But, that remains to be seen. Also, on that video, Ryan Yates, how sculpted is that lad looking? My word, he looks like he's ready for another battle for the shirt already.
Good. Yeah, Taiwo looked lean. They all come back looking lean. So, yeah, that was good. That was good, certainly. Kit launch is at 6:00 today. Oh, man, I feel for the Forest people. I put a lot of work into that, and it's going to come out, and people are going to crap all over it, I think, probably, because of all this Gibbs-White news. So that's harsh and sad for Forest, because I'm sure it'll be really good, and it looks a good kit. But so keep your eye out for that, people. Right. Oh, final thoughts. I don't know, Tails, anything you want to add? Anything you want to plug in the Athletic? It's probably to be written, I would say, but anything you want to add before we go?
There's a lot of stuff that's ready to go when certain things happen. Mainly the Elanga deal. We've done a lot of background on Elanga, and there's a Forest Q&A that we asked for questions for last week. That the answers haven't been published yet. I think that's going live tomorrow as well. So anybody that's been waiting for that and wondering why I've done the world's slowest Q&A, it is coming.
Good. Well, it's definitely worth subscribing to Athletic because they've been breaking this Gibbs-White stuff today. So yeah, do track those lads, certainly. Right, Pete, final thoughts from you. Good luck.
Yes, something for me to look forward to, which doesn't really help anyone. Doesn't help anyone else, but it's going to make me feel better. Oasis tomorrow, Heaton Park. It's finally happening. Been waiting years for this. Absolutely buzzing. So I can forget about Morgan Gibbs-White and various travails for a day and go back to my youth.
That's good for you. I mean, it's not really the uplifting message I was hoping for.
I'm most worried about how sad I'm feeling right now. I can't solve everyone's problems.
You've got to roll with it, Matt. You've got to roll with it.
Oh, absolutely, very good.
My God,
I'm not going to do another one. It's too cheap.
Tails longing for some tabloid days there.
Could we just slide away quietly?
Right. Little by little, the squad is getting torn apart. There you go.
It's good stuff.
Everyone's joining in. No, that's not one. I clicked on the wrong button. Right. We shall be back tomorrow, as mentioned, with Lewis McGugan. I'm not sure what time. That's to be confirmed. But yeah, Lewis and maybe Mark as well. So we'll pick up this thread and see if it's a more upbeat show. So apologies to people who found this a miserable one, but hopefully you will still put a like on this. You will still consider subscribing. You will still consider membership and Patreon. And we can get podcast merchandise if you want to brighten up your day from our website, which I think is forest-focus.co.uk. I should really know that.
That is unbelievable. I don't think I've ever heard someone introduce their website with, which I think is before.
I'm trying to find.
Google
there
is your
was a
friend.
slide for it. Yeah, exactly. When I used to cover Panthers, years ago, going off on a tangent, I mean, they would announce they'd signed a player at, honestly, the middle of the night, 4 a.m., and they would say details on the website and not a link, not say where the website was or anything. You had fun doing that with covering Forest for Waz Tales. Do you remember? I mean, obviously you remember just randomly announcing a signing on his Twitter account out of the blue.
Yeah, in between pictures of him shooting animals in the face. Yeah.
Yeah, and watches. Yeah, he put pictures of Rolexes on and stuff like that thing, didn't he? Yeah. What a man, what a time. These are different times, certainly. So, yeah, right. I'm babbling. Sorry about this show today, everyone. If you've enjoyed it, hit like. Appreciate the company of, first of all, Pete Blackburn.
Thanks for having me. And let me just do a public service warning. Tomorrow, if Mark Sutherland is on, you're going to get a lot of insight and some fantastic knowledge, but you are not going to get positivity. It's going to be absolutely hellish.
I know. I suspect he won't be on because I think he's been struggling with work, but now he'll be struggling with following this football club, I think, even more so. Paul Taylor, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been wonderful to have you on. We will have you on through the season in more happier times, should this Gibbs-White deal happen. But appreciate your time, appreciate everyone else's time. And if we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.